Hello guys, this is Tony, or Mirage, whatever you want to call me, coming back at you with another video. And in this video I'm going to be looking at St. George the Martyr, and we're going to be looking at what this idea, or image I mean to say, of St. George the Martyr means to me, and what I think it means to Bladee. Like, I'm just going to be giving my interpretation of this motif. And what's valuable about this motif is just like it's pretty clear when he says St. George the Martyr, we can just look up St. George the Martyr, and that's actually what I did. I'm going to be referencing this Wikipedia page throughout. I did read most of it, and I found some interesting stuff, some interesting connections that I think you guys will enjoy. But let's first go to Bladee, and what does he say in the Pitchfork interview? The interviewer says, he says, "I'm trying to use St. George to make some music." And the interviewer says, "Which saint is that, I wonder?" And he responds with a smile, "Oh, he's the one killing the dragon." So the main idea with this that I'm going to try to bring to light is that when Bladee is admiring St. George for killing the dragon, Bladee says in Obedient, "Feel like OD9, I'm a dragon." Maybe Bladee is trying to slay the dragon inside himself. And it's like, well, what does that mean? Well, maybe he's trying to slay the inner darkness or the inner evil that's inside himself, So, if you kind of aren't really understanding what I'm saying there, I would actually recommend checking out the night video, because we talk more about his inner darkness that he's like trying to wrestle with. But what I think that Bladee is trying to do when he brings up St. George is, first he tells us about the dragon, and that he's the one killing the dragon or slaying the dragon. And it's like, well, what is that? I think it's Blade's inner evil that he's trying to slay. And if we go to St. George the Martyr, it says his pursuit for stardom, So that I think is interesting, because Bladee is trying to emulate St. George's pursuit for stardom. But how does St. George achieve stardom? Well, he was a martyr who died for his Christian faith, So when Bladee says he's in the pursuit of stardom, it's not like a stardom that's like money, fame, billionaires, actors, actresses. It's not that type of stardom. It's the type of stardom that's achieved when you, in St. George's case, fully commit yourself to the faith and are willing to die for it, which is one of the greatest sacrifices you can make, right? And that's how St. George the Martyr became so venerated as a saint in the Christian church, right? And it says in Ash Jade that feeling that you hate is said to hold a saint, So it's like this feeling he hates, this darkness, There's a way he can overcome it. There's a way he can slay that dragon and become a saint, much like St. George, if he embraces his faith, if he embraces his shield, and it says shield down here at the bottom of the album art, right? And I think that if you want to, and I think you can definitely make this connection, right? That slaying the dragon inside yourself, the evil inside yourself, is also like slaying your demons. And this is a much clearer motif that Bladee first introduces in the full intro, which is actually where we first get the first reference to St. George. He says, "St. George, these demons in me, kill, kill, kill." And he's talking about washing away the pain and guilt. So all of these are very, very Christian imagery. I think of like baptism, like washing away your sins, right? And he says, I walk in darkness still, but these demons are in me. Kill, kill, kill. That's the important part, right? And in End of the Road, he says, I'm coming down clean, Saint Michael. You know, I see demons in my life. I kill, kill, kill. Saint Michael is the one who banished Satan, you know, to hell, in the Christian tradition, right? So, that's what I kind of want to make clear here, is like, this idea of darkness inside yourself, evil inside yourself, sins that you must confess, as he says in the full intro, this dragon that's inside yourself. That's what Bladee is saying he needs to slay, and that's what he's encouraging us to do, is to slay our own dragon, you know, to be. And he personally is in pursuit of stardom, but not like a material stardom, or like a stardom that's of this world. You know, he wants to pursue a stardom that's like that's built off of nothing, right? He says, I'm king nothing. You know, he doesn't want to be known for anything except maybe his faith and his pursuit to fight, you know, his pursuit to fight for the good that's inside himself, you know, his pursuit to fight against the evil. And that's the interesting thing about St. George, is like St. George is venerated as a military saint, you know, since the Crusades, you know. So, because he not only fought the dragon, he was also fighting for justice, you know, and he was fighting for justice while fighting the dragon as well, right? So yeah, those were some big things I wanted to touch upon. When I was reading the article of St. George, there were certain things that were popping out to me that I thought I might share with you guys. First, it says he died on April 23rd, 303, and that's also his saint day. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Bladee released his album on April 29th. You know, April 23rd, April 29th. He basically replaced the 3 with a 9, if he did that intentionally. I think it's definitely pretty likely, you know, the feast day of St. George the Dragon and the release of the EP being in the same month. But also just the number 3 is everywhere throughout the state. You know, 303 died on April 23rd. And if we scroll down, and it actually talks about the Muslim legends, it says that after confronting a king, like this evil king, George was tortured many times to no effect. And then it says, according to Muslim legend, he was martyred under the rule of Diocletian and killed 3 times, but was resurrected each time. So there's the number 3 again, you know. But Bladee is almost trying to say, like, he wants to resurrect himself, you know, and get rid of this evil, this dragon, you know, and slay this dragon. So I think that Bladee, probably looking at St. George's life, like, he probably sees a lot of parallels between his journey of faith and St. George's journey of faith. And he probably sees the number 3 a lot through the history, right? Yeah, so the last thing I kind of want to talk about is when I was looking through this Wikipedia article, I'm trying to see exactly where I found it, but it was talking about St. George's Cross. And I was like, oh, St. George's Cross. What's that? You know? And I went and I clicked, and it's like, oh, it's a red cross, right? You go to Google and you type in St. George's Cross, and you see the red cross. And that is a theme that pops up in Blade's lyrics. It's been popping up more recently. We see it in Cold Visions. He says, "Red cross we on that hill again." You know? And then in Yes, 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 off of Crest, Echo 2K says he dropped everything off at the Red Cross. And so I'll probably have to release another video touching upon this, but the Red Cross is like something that kind of represents Blade's spiritual enlightenment. I've talked about how the safe house is like kind of represents that too, but the Red Cross, it kind of like adds this, you know, it's interesting because it kind of like is how Blade incorporates his darkness with the light, you know, is that he prays to a red cross, as he says in 1 second. So yeah, I think that's definitely intentional, right? That Blade, you know, maybe got the idea of the Red Cross from St. George's Cross, you know, and that's why he's now coming out and talking about St. George and like his ultimate motive, that he wants to like be like St. George in his pursuit for stardom, you know. And I think that the image behind a cross goes obviously much deeper, you know, when you look at like a cross in Christianity, right? And I think that the color red is important because it symbolizes like blood, you know. So when we think of St. George the Martyr as someone who died, you know, and then the cross also being an image, you know, as like a torture device, right? So yeah, so these are just things that you can start thinking about. I had one more thing I kind of wanted to touch on, and that was when I was reading the Wikipedia article. If we just go back, it says the Arabs believe that George can restore mad people to their senses, and to say a person has been sent to St. George's is the equivalent to saying he has been sent to a madhouse, right? And so I just think that's interesting because maybe Blade looks up to St. George because he's trying to be cured of his madness, you know. And when we go to Haha by Blade, what does Blade say? I'm crazy, I'm crazy, I'm crazy, I'm crazy, I'm crazy. You know, that's off Spider. So yeah, that's another thing I just kind of wanted to mention as a connection that I've made. But yeah, at the end of the day, this is just my personal interpretation. There's a lot more I could have talked about here, but trying to keep these videos relatively short. If you guys enjoyed, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and leave a comment for any ideas that you've had that you'd like to see a video made on, and I will definitely consider it. Alright, take it easy.